Christian Horner's revenge against Red Bull has just been leaked after deciding to immediately join Alpine as team principal. Stay until the end to find out all the secret techniques from Red Bull's engineers that he plans to apply at Alpine to build a car similar to the Red Bull. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Christian Horner's exit from Red Bull Racing, once unthinkable, now reverberates across the Formula One landscape with a force that few departures in the sport's modern history have ever generated. It's the end of a legacy that defined an era, a legacy forged over 20 relentless years of pushing boundaries, rewriting the competitive blueprint, and transforming a fledgling team backed by an energy drink company into a motorsport juggernaut. The numbers alone barely scratch the surface: 6 Constructors' Championships, 8 Drivers' Championships, over 100 victories, and a level of strategic dominance that turned pit walls into pressure cookers and made rivals desperate to decode his formula. And yet, it all collapsed not with a graceful farewell tour, but with a jarring silence, a closed door, and whispers of internal fractures, political tensions, and unresolved allegations. One moment he was the mastermind behind Max Verstappen's rise. The next he was a man cast adrift, stripped of power, prestige, and purpose. The paddock, known for its short memory and rapid pivot to new headlines, now can't stop talking about the one man who suddenly has no team to lead and no paddock pass with his name on it. But Christian Horner is not the type to vanish quietly. His exit has ignited not just curiosity, but a frenzy, a charged atmosphere thick with speculation, potential power plays, and strategic recalibrations. Team principals are watching each other closely. Boardrooms across Europe are buzzing behind frosted glass walls. Phone calls are being made in hushed tones. And while some teams are too entrenched in their own cultures to ever consider such a seismic hire, others are seeing a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Because when you strip away the controversy, the media noise, the swirling narratives, you're left with a single undeniable truth: Horner wins. He builds. He commands loyalty. He reshapes organizations. He doesn't just manage a team, he engineers dynasties. Which brings the focus to one of the most unexpected yet increasingly likely destinations for Horner's next chapter: Alpine. A team mired in uncertainty, plagued by revolving door leadership, and caught in a tug-of-war between ambition and reality, Alpine is, on paper, a high-risk move. Their trajectory over the past few seasons has been anything but stable: disjointed management changes, lackluster on-track performances, and a talent pool that's either underdeveloped or underutilized. The whispers of boardroom impatience in Boulogne-Billancourt grow louder with every race weekend, as Renault's patience wears thin watching their factory team spiral toward irrelevance. But therein lies the seductive allure of the Alpine opportunity for Horner. The chaos, the broken structures, the desperate need for vision. It's the perfect storm for a man who has made a career out of building order from disorder and turning underdogs into apex predators. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Alpine's internal culture, long criticized for its bureaucracy and hesitancy to embrace radical change, would likely clash with Horner's direct, unfiltered style. But if there's one individual who can bulldoze legacy systems and replace them with a single-minded vision, it's the same man who wrestled power away from established names at Red Bull, navigated countless political landmines, and emerged, until recently, as an immovable pillar of the paddock. That Alpine is even entertaining such a bold move suggests a new level of desperation, or perhaps, evolution. If they hand Horner the keys, they're not just hiring a strategist. They're betting the future of the brand on his ability to orchestrate a transformation that would need to go beyond just the race weekend. Infrastructure, recruitment, driver development, aerodynamic philosophy. Every cornerstone of a modern F1 team would be on the table. And the risks? They're monumental. Bringing in Horner would mean aligning with a figure currently surrounded by shadows, ethical questions, unresolved tensions with former allies, and public opinion still very much divided. For a manufacturer brand like Renault, that's not a PR gamble, it's a strategic firestorm waiting to ignite. Yet in the Machiavellian theater of Formula One, success has always had a way of cleansing the past. One season of podiums, a leap up the constructors' table, a resurgence of relevance, and suddenly, headlines shift. Criticism fades. Horner, the villain in one paddock, could become the savior in another. Of course, Alpine isn't the only potential suitor. There are quieter murmurings from other quarters. Sauber, preparing for its Audi metamorphosis, may see in Horner the stabilizing championship-caliber figure to lead their ambitious long-term project. Williams, caught between nostalgia and reinvention, could be another wild card, especially under their new American stewardship, which is rumored to favor high-profile leadership moves. Even Aston Martin, with their aggressive hiring spree and deep-pocketed ambitions, may not be entirely out of the picture. In short, the game of musical chairs at the top of F1 management is heating up, and Horner is the ultimate high-stakes piece. Yet through all the rumors, counter-rumors, and thinly veiled denials, the most compelling question remains: what does Horner want? Does he crave redemption? Does he seek revenge against those who forced him out? Or does he feel liberated, unshackled from a project that perhaps he no longer fully recognized as his own? His next move will speak volumes, not just about the state of his career, but about the changing dynamics of Formula One leadership in an era where legacy, performance, and public perception are more entangled than ever before. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. This is not just a story of a team principal looking for a new desk. This is about power, identity, resurrection. Christian Horner didn't just lose a job, he lost an empire he helped build from the ground up. And if history has taught anything about men like him, it's that they don't fade, they reload. The next paddock he walks into won't just be watching him, they'll be measuring the tremors that follow. Alpine finds itself teetering on the edge of a crisis that threatens to spiral into a full-blown catastrophe. The atmosphere within the Aston-based team is tense, uncertain, and increasingly devoid of any clear direction. Their on-track performance has become alarmingly inconsistent, veering from mildly encouraging to utterly forgettable with no discernible pattern or upward trajectory. Pierre Gasly, the only driver to have scored any points so far, has managed a mere 11, a number that does little more than highlight just how bleak the situation truly is. His efforts, though commendable, cannot mask the deep strategic void surrounding the team. Meanwhile, Jack Doohan and Franco Colapinto, both young drivers with promising resumes and undeniable talent, have yet to show any meaningful impact. Their lack of points is not merely a reflection of inexperience or adaptation struggles. It's symptomatic of a much deeper and systemic problem within Alpine's organizational structure and decision-making framework. The decision to rely on a trio of drivers with such wildly different profiles, Gasly the veteran, Doohan the development project, and Colapinto the high-risk gamble, signals a team grappling with identity issues. There is no coherent strategy uniting these drivers under a single competitive vision. Instead, Alpine appears to be operating under a cloud of confusion, throwing pieces at the board and hoping one sticks. This chaotic approach is only magnified by the reintroduction of Flavio Briatore into the team's upper echelons. His return has generated a media frenzy, as one would expect from a figure whose name alone evokes memories of both brilliance and scandal. However, the noise surrounding Briatore has yet to convert into tangible gains for the team. He remains more of a symbol than a solution, more of a disruptor than a unifier. His larger-than-life personality continues to command attention, but not results. The addition of Steve Nielsen as managing director has further thickened the fog surrounding Alpine's leadership. While Nielsen is theoretically responsible for the day-to-day operations, his role is continuously overshadowed by Briatore's looming presence. Within the paddock, few believe Nielsen is the true decision-maker. Conversations behind closed doors, whispers in the hospitality areas, and subtle paddock politics all point toward Briatore as the de facto power broker. He might not have an official title that spells it out, but every critical move seems to trace back to his influence. This shadow governance, where authority is split between official titles and unofficial control, creates a dangerously unstable environment. Decision-making becomes fragmented, accountability diluted, and direction lost. Enter Christian Horner. The rumors surrounding his potential move to Alpine have electrified the paddock and ignited debates among fans, insiders, and stakeholders. Horner is a polarizing figure, but one whose credentials are undisputed. He built Red Bull Racing into a juggernaut, leading them through eras of dominance, internal chaos, and fierce rivalries with a level of tenacity and vision that few can replicate. His arrival at Alpine would mark a seismic shift in Formula One's leadership landscape. But the real question is whether Alpine's already tangled leadership web can accommodate another powerful voice, or whether it will snap under the strain of too many competing egos. The idea of Horner and Briatore coexisting in the same organization sounds, on paper, like a recipe for internal combustion. Yet there's an intriguing history between the two men that complicates the narrative. Their relationship, which dates back nearly 20 years, is built on more than mere professional courtesy. There is mutual respect, an unspoken acknowledgement of each other's strengths, and perhaps even a fascination with what the other represents. Briatore is flamboyant, impulsive, and unapologetically old school. Horner, by contrast, is strategic, deliberate, and adept at navigating modern F1's hyperpolitical terrain. Their union would be unconventional, unpredictable, and possibly explosive, but it could also be Alpine's best shot at reinvention. There is a tantalizing possibility that these two alpha figures might not clash, but instead, complement each other. Briatore could offer the raw aggression and political clout that Alpine sorely lacks, while Horner could bring structure, stability, and a long-term competitive vision. In theory, they could form a leadership tandem that fuses charisma with competence, ruthlessness with reason. However, this potential alliance carries with it enormous risk. Horner's own image has taken several hits in recent months, from internal tensions to public allegations that have left him walking a tightrope. Associating with Briatore, a man whose legacy includes both championship glory and deep controversy, could expose Horner to further scrutiny at a time when he can least afford it. The optics alone of such a pairing would be incendiary. Sponsors, fans, and rivals would question Alpine's judgment, wondering if the team was doubling down on drama rather than doubling down on performance. And yet, that same drama might be exactly what Alpine needs to break out of its malaise. The team has been languishing in mediocrity, plagued by indecision, and suffocated by internal politics. Injecting two dominant, opinionated, and battle-tested figures into the mix could blow up the current structure, but sometimes, you have to burn the house down to build a better one. For now, Alpine stands at a crossroads. The team can continue down its current path, relying on fragmented leadership, underperforming talent, and vague ambition, or it can embrace radical transformation. Christian Horner represents a fork in the road, a man who could either catalyze Alpine's rebirth or trigger an even deeper implosion. Flavio Briatore, enigmatic as ever, looms in the background, ready to assert his influence regardless of official titles. If these two forces collide within the same organizational structure, the impact will be felt far beyond the confines of Aston. It could redefine Alpine, or destroy it. Gasly's situation is far more complex than a simple case of professional memory. It is a raw emotional scar that hasn't healed, not within the fanbase, not within the driver himself, and certainly not within the inner politics of the paddock. When Christian Horner pulled the plug on Gasly's Red Bull stint in 2019 after just 13 races, the impact wasn't just a cold personnel change, it was a public dismantling of a young driver's self-belief. Gasly wasn't just dropped. He was humiliated on a global stage and then forced to rebuild his career brick by brick, race by race, in the shadows. Every podium he clawed back with AlphaTauri was a silent rebellion, every overtaking maneuver a sharp reminder to those who dismissed him too soon. And now the same figure who orchestrated his fall from grace may be stepping into the very team that offered Gasly a second life, Alpine, the lifeline that allowed him to breathe again. The tension this could generate isn't theoretical. It's visceral. If Horner walks through those doors, the dynamic in the garage will instantly shift. The awkward glances, the unresolved tension, the psychological friction, it could be unbearable if not addressed directly and with brutal honesty. Alpine would need to engineer a reconciliation not just of roles, but of wounds. They'd need to convince Gasly that this isn't déjà vu, that this isn't another trapdoor waiting to open beneath his feet. They'd need to show that Horner isn't coming to dictate, but to collaborate. That requires meetings behind closed doors, honest dialogues, possibly even facilitated mediation. Because if this festers, it won't just derail Gasly's motivation, it could fracture the entire team's chemistry before the first lap of the season. And this isn't just about Gasly. Horner carries with him a legacy that's as polarizing as it is powerful. For every engineer who respects his strategic ruthlessness, there's a driver who questions his loyalty. For every team principal who admires his longevity, there's a rival who suspects manipulation behind every move. He's not just a team boss, he's a symbol of an era that, for better or worse, is tainted by controversy, dominance, and internal turbulence. Bringing that into a team like Alpine, a team still struggling to find its footing, still searching for identity and stability, could be like setting a lit match next to a powder keg. The risk isn't abstract, it's calculable. And if Alpine's top brass are serious about this move, they'll have to decide whether they're willing to gamble team unity, Gasly's morale, and the entire structural rhythm of their organization on a man who's as likely to ignite brilliance as he is to split opinion. At the same time, the Ferrari whispers haven't died. They linger like smoke after a fire, faint, but unmistakably present. Christian Horner's name continues to circulate behind closed doors in Maranello corridors, in hushed conversations that no one will confirm, but few deny. Ferrari's longing isn't just for performance, it's for mythology. The golden years of Jean Todt, Ross Brawn, and Michael Schumacher still cast a long haunting shadow over every decision the Scuderia makes. They don't just want to win, they want to dominate, to awe, to resurrect an identity that has faded into wistful memory. And Fred Vasseur, for all his methodical competence, isn't delivering that myth. He's stabilizing, not electrifying. He's managing expectations, not exceeding them. Internally, there is growing restlessness. Leclerc, once the heir apparent, is growing impatient. Hamilton, though still adjusting, is not in the mood for patience. They don't want promises about what might come in 2027 or 2028. They want to feel the pulse of a title charge today, tomorrow, this very season. And in the absence of that, Horner becomes not just an option, but a potential savior figure. The trouble, of course, is that Horner doesn't arrive clean. The recent internal investigations, the whispers of misconduct, the ethical questions, all of that clings to him like residue. He may be cleared in the eyes of the law, but not necessarily in the court of public opinion. For Ferrari, a team already burdened with an intense media spotlight and a reputation for internal drama, adding Horner could feel like inviting chaos into an already combustible environment. And yet, the allure remains. Because Horner knows how to win. He knows how to build dynasties. He knows how to navigate political minefields, manipulate regulations, and push the limits of what a team can achieve under pressure. That kind of leadership isn't taught, it's forged in fire. And Ferrari, in its most honest moments, knows it doesn't have that right now. So the landscape is treacherous. Alpine may get a brilliant tactician, but at the cost of emotional volatility and potential team discord. Ferrari may gain a wartime consigliere, but at the risk of media frenzy and internal explosion. And Horner, for all his accolades, stands at a crossroads where every step forward could just as easily be a misstep. Nothing about these negotiations is clean, easy, or certain. The paddock is watching. The drivers are whispering. The engineers are speculating. And in the middle of it all stands Christian Horner, a man who has won more than most, but who now must fight for something even harder to reclaim: trust. Despite being officially cleared by Red Bull's internal investigation, the lingering controversy tied to Christian Horner's alleged misconduct continues to hang like an immovable cloud over his professional reputation. The damage to his public image has proven far more lasting than any legal or corporate resolution, leaving a complex, emotionally charged situation that refuses to fade. What began as an internal matter escalated into a global headline, with whispers echoing through the paddocks, hospitality suites, and boardrooms of Formula One. The court of public opinion has not been so quick to forgive or forget. Every paddock insider, sponsor, and executive understands that Formula One is more than a sport, it's a billion-dollar marketing machine, where perception is currency. And right now, Horner's name is far from a safe investment. Even though he has decades of experience, multiple Constructors' Championships under his belt, and a strategic acumen that helped shape Red Bull's dominance in the hybrid era, none of that seems enough to neutralize the fallout. Especially when it comes to teams like Ferrari, where tradition, prestige, and public relations are not just values, they're sacred pillars. In Maranello, every decision is scrutinized, every figurehead is expected to embody the legacy of Enzo Ferrari himself. And according to sources deep within Italian media circles, that's precisely where the deal breaker lies. It's not a matter of competence or tactical brilliance. It's about optics, about control, about managing the delicate ballet of legacy, expectation, and politics. Horner, with all his baggage, presents a risk many in the Scuderia deem simply too great to take. The whispers out of Italy paint a very clear picture. Ferrari's internal discussions regarding Horner have cooled to near Arctic levels. While initial talks may have entertained the notion of bringing in a proven winner to finally dethrone Red Bull from the top, the reputational risk became too large, too toxic, too combustible. For a team that already deals with internal pressure from Italian media, national pride, and demanding fans, the last thing they want is a firestorm that overshadows the racing. No matter how skilled Horner is in navigating turbulent waters, the sense inside Maranello is that introducing him to an already pressure-filled environment could be like dropping a match into a fuel tank. Even the possibility of reigniting past glory under his leadership wasn't enough to outweigh the potential cost in public trust and media scrutiny. Beyond Ferrari, the wider paddock remains cautious. Even if another team were willing to look past the scandal and offer Horner the reins, he wouldn't be able to step into that role immediately. A binding gardening leave clause effectively sidelines him until the conclusion of the 2025 season. For someone so accustomed to being at the epicenter of strategic operations, being frozen out of day-to-day decisions is more than just inconvenient, it's a strategic handicap. And that clause, while perhaps standard in executive transitions, has significant implications in the high-stakes world of Formula One, where timing is everything and momentum can evaporate in a single season. This enforced hiatus serves as both an opportunity and an obstacle. On one hand, it allows Horner to distance himself from the controversy, to let the headlines shift to new topics, and to rebrand his narrative behind the scenes. By the time January 2026 arrives, the media cycle may have softened, and teams might feel more confident taking a calculated risk. But on the other hand, that same timeline robs him of a once-in-a-generation opportunity, the lead up to the 2026 regulation changes. These are not minor tweaks. They represent one of the most seismic shifts in technical regulations the sport has seen in decades. The 2026 season will likely determine competitive hierarchies for years to come, and Horner, for all his strategic insight, will be forced to watch from the sidelines. By the time he's legally allowed to re-enter the sport in an official capacity, the crucial decisions, the ones that determine chassis philosophy, power unit integration, aero direction, and team culture, will have already been made. The next great era of Formula One will be in motion, and Horner, unable to shape its foundation, will inherit whatever structure a team has already built. That's a position he's rarely been in before, reactive rather than proactive, a chess master watching the board take shape without his hand guiding the pieces. While it absolves him from any immediate blame should a project fail, it also denies him the satisfaction, and the control, of architecting success from the ground up. What makes this situation even more complicated is the emotional toll. Horner isn't just any team principal, he's a symbol of Red Bull's rise, someone who became synonymous with victory, controversy, innovation, and leadership. To be reduced to a passive observer during one of the sport's most pivotal evolutionary moments must be agonizing. The silence, the lack of control, the forced distance from the paddock he once dominated, each day that passes is another reminder that reputational damage can outlast even the most favorable internal verdicts. In Formula One, as in politics, perception often overshadows truth. Teams are watching. So are sponsors, shareholders, and media moguls. Every step Horner takes is monitored, analyzed, and interpreted. A single meeting, a casual dinner with an executive, or an offhand remark can spark new rumors, new speculation, new headlines. The sport never sleeps, and neither does the scrutiny. Horner now finds himself navigating an unrelenting maze of politics, public relations, and personal redemption. The question is no longer whether he's capable, but whether the sport is willing to let him re-enter the narrative without making him the story itself. And as Formula One prepares to rewrite its rulebook, to enter an era that promises greater sustainability, more unpredictable racing, and a fresh slate for teams to redefine their futures, Horner remains a wild card. A brilliant, controversial, polarizing wild card, out of play for now, but never completely off the board. Outside of Alpine and Ferrari, where discussions surrounding Christian Horner's future have been somewhat grounded in recent organizational shakeups and leadership re-evaluations, another name has surfaced, one far more speculative, yet no less fascinating or impactful: Aston Martin. Lawrence Stroll, a man who has never been shy about making ambitious high-stakes decisions to propel his team into the upper echelons of Formula One, is exactly the kind of figure who could contemplate a seismic move like hiring Horner. His tenure as team owner has been defined by audacity, from recruiting marquee drivers like Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso to pouring hundreds of millions into infrastructure and personnel, all to build an operation that could rival the might of Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull. Bringing in a figure as polarizing, powerful, and accomplished as Horner wouldn't just continue that trend, it would redefine it. It would send a message to every other team on the grid: Aston Martin isn't just here to compete, they're here to dominate. But even a man like Stroll, known for his fearlessness in business and motorsport alike, may balk at the consequences of such a gamble. Because as audacious as such a move sounds on paper, it quickly unravels into a web of contradictions, complications, and potential catastrophes when placed under scrutiny. The timing, above all, is a critical factor. Adrian Newey's departure from Red Bull, a move that sent shockwaves through the paddock and altered the competitive balance of power, was, according to multiple insiders, not a peaceful or inevitable exit, but one triggered by rising tension, philosophical clashes, and growing discomfort with Christian Horner's leadership. For months, whispers had emerged from within the walls of Milton Keynes, hinting at fractures in what had once seemed like an impenetrable fortress of performance and cohesion. Newey, a man whose genius is equaled only by his deep sense of autonomy and loyalty, reportedly felt increasingly marginalized. His designs, once gospel, were allegedly questioned. His vision, once embraced, was reportedly dismissed. And at the center of that disillusionment was Horner, a man whose iron-fisted control of Red Bull racing left little room for dissent. Now imagine transplanting that tension into the very place Newey has been rumored to be considering as his next chapter. Aston Martin has gone to great lengths to lure the design legend to Silverstone. They've constructed state-of-the-art facilities, offered him sweeping influence over their technical future, and most importantly, dangled the kind of creative freedom that once made Red Bull so attractive. Everything, every brick, every conversation, every promise, has been geared toward one objective: building the ultimate brain trust around Newey's singular vision. Bringing Horner into that equation, especially given the shadow of their recent fallout, could shatter everything. It could derail the negotiations, poison the atmosphere, and send Newey straight into the arms of another team, perhaps even Ferrari or McLaren, teams that would leap at the opportunity to hand him the keys to their technical kingdoms. For Stroll, then, the dilemma is not just about choosing leadership. It's about choosing the future. Is Horner's political skill set, his championship pedigree, and his combative drive worth risking the most prized technical mind in the history of Formula One? It's a paradox so volatile that even Stroll's trademark boldness might not be enough to justify the risk. And yet, even if the Aston Martin door closes, if it's deemed too toxic, too complicated, too unstable, Christian Horner's saga in motorsport may be far from over. The man has never been just a team principal. He's been a power broker, a media force, a master tactician in the political maze that is Formula One governance. His influence has extended far beyond the pit wall, into Concord Agreement negotiations, regulatory shaping, and behind-the-scenes alliances that often determine the direction of the sport itself. Which begs the question: could Horner's next act be even more audacious than anything seen before? Could he trade the paddock for Paris, the team radio for the boardroom, and attempt what few would dare imagine: leadership of the FIA itself? At first glance, the idea seems outlandish. The FIA presidency is not just a ceremonial title. It is a geopolitical chessboard, a stage for diplomacy, policymaking, and the relentless scrutiny of public and private interests. It is a role that demands transparency, trust, and the careful balancing of corporate power, national interests, and sporting integrity. In many ways, it is the ultimate paradox, the most powerful seat in motorsport, and yet one that requires the greatest restraint. Horner, for all his accolades, carries baggage. His recent departure from Red Bull was marred by controversy, allegations that, while not proven in a court of law, have created a fog of suspicion and public doubt that continues to linger over his legacy. In global politics, perception often trumps reality. And in a sport that is watched, dissected, and litigated by millions across the globe, perception is everything. Sponsors don't care about legal nuance. Governments don't care about press statements. The court of public opinion is brutal, and once trust is broken, it is nearly impossible to regain. Even if Horner were to clear every legal hurdle, even if his record at Red Bull were to be preserved in its full, glittering brilliance, the optics of his candidacy for FIA leadership would be an Everest of its own. The media firestorm, the political backlash, the sponsors threatening to pull support, the internal divisions it would create across national motorsport federations. It would be a war, not of strategy on the track, but of ideology in the boardrooms of world motorsport. And in that war, even a tactician as ruthless as Horner might find himself outmaneuvered. So where does that leave him? Too experienced to fade quietly into retirement. Too polarizing to be universally embraced. Too ambitious to accept irrelevance. Horner's next move, wherever it lands, won't just be another chapter in his storied career. It could be a flashpoint that reshapes the political and competitive landscape of Formula One for years to come. Whether he walks back into a team garage or into the marble halls of motorsport governance, one thing is certain: the story of Christian Horner is far from over, and its next twist may be the most explosive yet. So what lies ahead for Christian Horner? Not in vague terms or hopeful predictions, but in the brutal political results-driven reality of modern Formula One. After 2 decades of glory, controversy, and unrelenting dominance, his name no longer carries the unquestioned authority it once did. Whispers have turned into headlines. Allegiances have fractured. What was once a fortress of control around him now feels more like a minefield, and each step forward is shadowed by suspicion, second-guessing, and the unnerving awareness that one wrong move could seal his fate for good. In a sport where perception is power, and silence can be as damning as guilt, Horner finds himself walking the razor's edge between redemption and irrelevance. Behind the scenes, the whispers are deafening. Boards, investors, and team principals are calculating, not dreaming. The Horner of the past, the master strategist, the relentless negotiator, the man who transformed Red Bull from energy drink experiment to F1 superpower, is now being evaluated not by what he achieved, but by the damage his presence could potentially bring. His brilliance is not in question, his stability is. His legacy is not forgotten, it is in flux. Formula One has never been a sport that rewards sentimentality, and the very system he once bent to his will is now bending its gaze toward his vulnerabilities. And yet, amidst the tension, a door creaks open. Alpine. A team trapped in perpetual transition. A project with ambition, but no anchor. A structure with funding, but lacking fire. There's an undeniable allure in pairing Alpine's raw potential with Horner's hardened experience. The thought sends tremors through the paddock. Is this the perfect storm of desperation and defiance? Could this be the moment where two fractured forces find clarity in chaos? Alpine needs leadership. Horner needs a proving ground. This could be more than a comeback. It could be a statement of defiance against the very narrative that tried to bury him. But the question remains, would Alpine dare? Do they risk it all on a man whose presence guarantees headlines, internal power struggles, and the kind of pressure that can either forge champions or expose cracks that were never meant to see daylight? They would be inviting not just a team principal, but a political heavyweight, a figure whose every decision will be scrutinized, whose every word will ripple across media cycles and boardrooms alike. And yet, they might not have a better choice. Because what Alpine lacks isn't just performance, it's identity, it's swagger, it's belief. And in those categories, Horner is unmatched. And what of Horner himself? Is the hunger still there? Not the performative hunger for interviews or sponsor handshakes, but the deep, all-consuming fire to reshape a team, to silence doubters not with PR spin but with podiums and constructors' points. Can he rise, not as the man in charge of a dynasty, but as the architect of a resurrection? Could he take a broken, misaligned Alpine and turn it into a symbol of vindication, a rolling message to the paddock that he was never the problem, that, in fact, he was the glue holding it all together? Or is he too far removed from the core? Has the political fallout, the internal war zones, and the damage to his credibility taken too much of a toll? Can the paddock ever see him again as a visionary, or has the spectacle of scandal rewritten the entire narrative? Sometimes, in Formula One, legacy is not defined by the victories, but by what follows them. And for Horner, the road back to influence might not be lit by championships, but by something more powerful, redemption. This isn't just a question of employment. It's a test of relevance. A challenge to the idea that one man can outlive the machine he helped build. If Horner does walk through Alpine stores, it won't be quietly. It will shake the balance of power. It will trigger a cascade of reactions across team strategies, driver decisions, and even sponsorship alignments. Because no matter what you think of him, love him, hate him, admire him, distrust him, Christian Horner is still one of the most influential figures Formula One has ever seen. And if given the opportunity, he may very well remind everyone why. So now, the spotlight shifts to Alpine, to their boardroom meetings, to their internal battles between risk and caution, because they hold the key, not just to their future, but potentially to the next chapter of one of Formula One's most controversial and compelling stories. Do they want to play it safe, fade into irrelevance, and cling to mediocrity? Or do they want to bet everything on a man who's made a career out of proving the impossible isn't just possible, but inevitable? And you, yes, you, what do you think? Is Horner still the right man to lead a revolution? Can he pull Alpine from the wreckage and elevate it into something terrifying, something admired, something feared? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We're reading every one of them. And when you're done, don't miss the video waiting on your screen. It unpacks the chaos inside Alpine, the fractures they can't hide, and the real reason they might need Christian Horner more than anyone is willing to admit.